Today is March 17th, 2019. I am Gregory Ryan. In this interview, I am having with Stephanie, who is my mother. Thank you, Stephanie, for taking this part in this interview with me today.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for having me.
Now let's start having you share your full name.
My name is Stephanie Veronica Ryan.
All right, thank you. Now let's start with the questions.
Sure.
When and where were you born?
Well, I was born at UC San Francisco Hospital in San Francisco, California. I was born on May 17th, 1969.
What was the house like growing up?
Well, I lived in South San Francisco, and I would say it was your very typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, middle-class family home. Shared it with my siblings and parents.
Very interesting. What was your earliest childhood memory?
My earliest childhood memory, I think, would be that of sitting in the backyard we lived in a little house in South San Francisco. My sister wasn't even born yet, and my grandfather had come over the house and brought a cheeseburger from McDonald's. And he always made such a big thing because I was so little, and I ate the whole cheeseburger from McDonald's. So I don't know if it's kind of one of those memories that has been meshed together because it's a story I heard so many times, or it's an actual memory. But when I go back far in my mind, I picture myself on the swing eating this cheeseburger.
What was your favorite toy and why?
My favorite toy would definitely be my baby doll. And I think the reason why is that I knew I always wanted to be a mommy.
What was your favorite thing to do for fun?
Favorite thing to do for fun was to play house or school. It was definitely something with my imagination. I love always play, whether it was playing in the house, outside, with my friends, with my siblings. I always liked something that was a game that incorporated using my imagination.
Nice. How were the holidays celebrated in your family? Did your family have any special traditions?
Well, yes. So we were always big on holidays. Birthdays were always a really big deal because that was your special day. Always very celebrated. Much of the traditions I've sort of carried on with my own family and children. Always had big Christmases, Thanksgivings, Easters, and it was always surrounded with lots of family and extended family.
Very nice. How was the world different today from when you were growing up as a kid?
No internet. I just think that technology has evolved and advanced so much that the world has definitely changed. It is such a faster paced world than when I was growing up, and I think there's both pros and cons to that.
Nice, very interesting. Next question. What do you know about your family's surname?
Well, my family's surname is Pasternak, and what I do know is that it is of a Polish descent. There's been a bit of controversy. Unfortunately, I never knew my great-grandfather who actually carried the name and passed it along to us. So all the stories we sort of got were from my grandmother, who wasn't exactly very fond of him. So, and then there was a lot of different stories that went along with the spelling of the last name. The Jewish version which was a Russian Jewish version, was spelled N-A-C-K. And then during World War II, when a lot of people migrated over to the United States, of course, with the Holocaust and everything, a lot of people changed their names and didn't want to admit that they were of Jewish descent, so they dropped the C, and the K is a Polish descent background. So I don't really know 100%. Might be something as time goes on that I look into a little bit more. It's always made me curious.
Yes. Next question. Are there any stories about your famous or infamous relatives in your from your family?
Oh, well, no. I mean, everybody likes to have some sort of claim to fame. I have a crazy stepmother who claims that she went to high school with one of the Doors, one of the guys that played in that famous band, the Doors, from the 60s. I also, there's always this one that knew that actor or this actor. There's not really anyone, so to speak, famous. Back to my surname, a famous author by the name of Boris Pasternak actually wrote a book called Dr. Zhivago, which is world known and famous. So that would always be something we could claim to fame. But other than that, not really.
Yeah. Have any recipes been passed down to you from your family members?
Oh, for sure. Unfortunately, they never quite taste exactly the same, but my one grandmother was a phenomenal cook. So I learned primarily to cook from her. I learned all of my wonderful Italian dishes, and I enjoy cooking. I learned that from her. And my other grandmother was a wonderful baker, my Grandma Teresa, and she has a very famous Irish bread recipe. I can tell you that I, however, have never made it taste like Grandma Teresa's. My sister has more of a knack for that kind of a thing, and hers tastes a little closer to that. But for the most part, I try to follow my Italian dishes to mimic that of my grandmother.
Yeah. What was your full name of your spouse, siblings, and parents?
Okay, full name of my spouse, Gregory Ray Ryan. He is, and I guess that would be Gregory Ray Ryan Sr., since we have a junior now. I have two siblings, Michael James Pasternak. That's my older brother. I have a younger sister, Jody Marie Medefesser is her name now. Maiden name, obviously, Pasternak. And then my parents were Peggy Ann Romero, born to Nick and Amelia Romero. Those are my grandparents. And my father's name was James Robert Pasternak.
Very interesting. Thank you. When and how did you meet your spouse? What did you do on dates?
Well, I actually had a roommate that was dating my spouse's brother. And we were sitting in her room one night, and I was flipping through one of her photo albums, and I saw my husband's picture in there. And my friend's name was Paula. And I said, Paula, ooh, who's that? I want to meet him. And oddly enough, we actually had quite a few phone conversations before I ever met him in person, and we would kind of joke around, and I would say, oh, is that my boyfriend? And then he would joke around, oh, you talking to my girlfriend, kind of a thing. And then ultimately I ended up getting to meet him, and we almost felt like we knew each other just from sort of the chit chats and the back and forth beforehand. When we first started dating, I already had a child, and my oldest son was 2 years old at the time. So I ended up doing a lot of dates, family kind of dates, yeah, with a child.
Yeah. Very nice. What was it like when you were proposed to?
Well, I actually initially went into panic mode because my husband pretended that his knee went out. I was just getting ready to go to work. It was Valentine's Day. I worked as a waitress. I had the evening shift, and probably 10 minutes before I was walking out the door, he pretended like his knee went out, got down on one knee, and asked me to marry him.
Funny. Where and when did you get married?
We got married at St. Veronica's Church in South San Francisco, and we were married on June 28th, 1997.
So how many years have you been married?
So this June, will be married 22 years.
Wow. What memory stands out the most from your wedding day?
Probably the fact that your dad got so choked up giving his vows, he almost started to cry. And that was that, in addition to just the funnest reception that I've ever been to. We just had a really, really good time. It was fun. My whole family and friends and everything was there. It was a good day.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for your time and taking time out of your day to answer these questions. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for asking me. I appreciate it.